Picture this, that you are sitting in a small office at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in 1962. And your job is to pick the people who will literally risk their lives to be shot into space. No big deal, right? Sure. You're looking at test pilots, military heroes, all people with perfect records and nerves of steel. You are looking for people like this. These are the people who will become legends. The first Americans to leave Earth and come back alive. But here's the thing about legends. They don't always feel legendary. If you're really into history or know a lot about space travel, then you might recognize the man on the bottom right, Jim Lovell, who was the commander of the Apollo 13 mission. But when Lovell was first selected as an astronaut, he didn't feel like hero material. Early in training, Jim admitted he constantly second-guessed himself. He was surrounded by guys with better test scores, stronger records, and more natural confidence. Looking back at that time, Jim said, "I always felt like I was the odd man out. I didn't think I had what it took." Yet he would go on to fly 4 space missions, including commanding Apollo 13, a mission where an explosion 200,000 miles from the Earth left his crew with no way home. For 4 days, the world watched as Lovell calmly led his team through what NASA called a successful failure, bringing them safely back to Earth, beating impossible odds. All that from a guy who struggled to believe in himself. So have you ever felt like that? Like when you look around at other people, do you think they have more talent, more faith, more skill, more whatever? Like you're somehow behind everyone else? Well, if so, you are in good company. Tonight, in our 3rd week of our Messed Up series, we'll meet someone who felt the exact same way. His name was Moses. And when God gave him what should have been the opportunity of a lifetime, Moses didn't exactly jump at the chance. Instead, he basically told God, "I think you might have the wrong person. Maybe you should ask someone else." Well, tonight we're going to see what happened when someone drowning in self-doubt came face to face with a God who saw something they couldn't see in themselves. And I think we'll find that it might just be possible that this same God sees something in you too. Moses was someone who certainly didn't see a leader when he looked in the mirror. Instead, he saw someone who messed up, someone who wasn't good enough, and someone who just didn't have what it takes. But in this series, as we've looked at people like Adam and Eve and Jonah, we've seen that God does not walk away from people when they fall short. In those moments, God tends to lean in, to speak, and to call them to do something great anyway. So let's start with the mission God gave Moses and how he responded. To understand what happens next, you need to know that Moses had just experienced something incredible. While tending sheep in the wilderness, he noticed a burning bush in the distance. But as he got closer, he realized something impossible was happening. The bush was on fire, but it wasn't being consumed by the flames. As Moses approached to investigate, God called out to him by name from the burning bush. In that moment, God revealed that he had been watching his people suffer in Egypt, and it was time to act. But God wasn't going to do this alone. He wanted Moses to play a key role in securing Israel's freedom. And that's where we will pick up our story. Exodus chapter 3, verse 10, where God says, "Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people out of Egypt." This was a really big deal. God was essentially telling Moses, "You're the guy. I am sending you to free my people." But Moses didn't respond with the, "Well, God, I'm honored." He didn't even ask for details. No, at that moment, Moses panicked. Look at verse 11. But Moses protested to God, "Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt?" Can you feel Moses' insecurity? He's not just questioning the mission, he's questioning himself. The question, "Who am I?" says, I'm not good enough for this. You've picked the wrong person. Now, if you've been here for the last few weeks of our series, you're probably noticing a pattern, and that is God does not pick the wrong person. But notice how God responds. It's not exactly the pep talk that I would have expected. Verse 12. God answered, "I will be with you, and this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain." God didn't tell Moses, "Hey, don't worry, you've got this." He didn't affirm Moses or explain why he chose him. Instead, God basically said, "I've got you." And how will Moses know that God's got him? Well, he will know when it's all over and the Israelites are worshiping God as free people who have been released from the bondage of slavery under Pharaoh. So, okay, on one hand, it's a big deal that God is promising to be with Moses every step of the way. But I can definitely understand why Moses might want slightly more reassurance. Let's continue, verse 13. But Moses protested, "If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, 'The God of your ancestors has sent me to you,' they will ask, 'What is his name?' Then what should I tell them?" God replied to Moses, "I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.'" Moses' anxiety was riding high. Have you ever been there? I think all of us have. He was concerned that he wouldn't know how to respond to the people. He was worried he wouldn't have the answers, but God's response cuts right through Moses' worry. Essentially, God was saying, you don't need all of the answers. You just need me. When God referred to himself as "I am," he was revealing something powerful about who he is. Constant, eternal, unchanging, and all-powerful. It was his way of saying, "I am everything you need." But God wasn't finished yet. Let's look at verse 15. God also said to Moses, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my eternal name, my name to remember for all generations." You see, this wasn't a new plan. It was all part of something bigger. God wasn't just inviting Moses to be a part of freeing Israel from Egypt. He was fulfilling his promises and unfolding a story that's been in motion since the beginning. But God wasn't sending Moses out with just a name and a promise. He also gave him some specific instructions. Verse 16. "Now go and call together all the elders of Israel. Tell them, 'Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me. He told me, I have been watching closely, and I see how the Egyptians are treating you. I have promised to rescue you from your oppression in Egypt. I will lead you to a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live." God didn't send Moses in blind. He laid out the plan, he confirmed his presence, and he gave Moses everything he needed to move forward. And you know what? God kept every single promise. Moses did lead the Israelites out of Egypt. God was with him through every plague, every confrontation with Pharaoh, and even when they crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. The same God who saw Moses' potential when Moses couldn't see it himself never left his side. But this isn't just an ancient story about Moses. It's a story about everyone who's ever stared at a challenge and thought, I am not good enough. There's no way I can do this. Thankfully, God's response never changes. He says, you are not doing it alone. Now, Moses' story happened thousands of years ago, but the principles we see here are just as relevant for us today. So whether you are feeling unprepared for a test, nervous about a difficult conversation, or wondering if God could actually use someone like you, Moses' story provides wisdom that we can all use to help shape how we see ourselves and our situations. So here's what we can learn from Moses' encounter with God. The first idea tonight is this. Number one, God sees more in us than we see in ourselves. When God told Moses, I'm sending you to Pharaoh, did you notice Moses' first question? It wasn't, who are you? It was, wait, who am I? Now, that sure sounds like a question, but I think it's more of a confession. Moses didn't believe in himself. He saw himself as someone who was messed up, didn't belong, and wasn't enough. In his mind, he wasn't a leader. He was a failure. But God's perspective was completely different. God didn't see Moses' past mistakes or current insecurities. He saw the person he created and loved deeply. God saw untapped potential, leadership qualities, and someone who could accomplish the impossible. And he didn't just hype up Moses by listing all of his qualifications. He just said 5 simple yet powerful words. I will be with you. Because when it comes down to it, what God sees matters more than what we feel. And when God looks at you, he sees someone worth calling. He sees someone worth using. He sees someone worth loving, flaws and all. The same God who called Moses sees more in you than you see in yourself. Another thing that we see from Moses' encounter, number 2, is you don't need all of the answers to say yes to God. See, Moses, he didn't just feel insecure. He felt unprepared. All right, look again at verse 13. Moses protested. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? Moses was essentially saying, what if they ask me questions that I can't answer? What if I don't know what to say? Sound familiar? We do the same thing all the time. We want to know the outcome before we take the first step. We delay obedience until we have a complete roadmap. But notice God's response. He doesn't give Moses a detailed step-by-step breakdown of how it's going to work. Instead, he gives him something better. Verse 14. God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. Translation, you don't have to have all of the answers. You just need me. God doesn't expect us to be experts. He just expects us to trust him. If God is calling us to something, he will give us everything we need to respond. Jesus actually told his disciples the exact same thing at the end of Matthew 28. This is Jesus speaking. He says, therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Jesus was sending his disciples into a world to fulfill his mission, much like God sent Moses. And notice he gives them the same promise. I am with you always. He's saying you're not going alone. And the third idea I want to make sure that we don't miss tonight is this. God's plans depend on your willingness, not on your confidence. Moses was full of doubts. Look at the questions he asked. Who am I? What do I say? What if they don't believe me? Moses' initial response to God is loud and clear. Please send someone else. But here's the wild part. God didn't change his mind. He stuck with Moses through every doubt, every excuse, and every fear. Why? Because God wasn't looking for perfection. He was looking for willingness. He didn't need Moses to be ready. He just needed Moses to trust him. And the best part, that hasn't changed. God still calls people who feel unqualified. He still uses people who have a messy past and a lack of confidence. Why? Because when we feel inadequate, we're more likely to lean on him instead of trying to do everything ourselves. And that's when his power really shows up. Check out how Paul describes this in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 9. Paul says, each time he said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. If you have ever thought God cannot use someone like me, remember Moses' story. God didn't wait for Moses to feel qualified. He saw the potential that Moses couldn't see in himself, and he's looking at you the same way. But if all of this is true, if God really does see potential in you that you can't see, if he's willing to work through your doubts and your fears, then the question becomes, what can we do about it? Well, let's look at 3 specific ways to live this out. And the first is this. It's to remind yourself of God's promise. If you're like Moses and sometimes struggle to see yourself the way that God sees you, I want to encourage you to go out of your way this week to let God's truth be louder than your doubts and your insecurities. I want you to find as many ways as possible to remind yourself of God's promise in the first part of Exodus 3:12, which says this, God answered, I will be with you. Put it somewhere that you will see it every day. It could be on your mirror, could be in your car, in your locker, in a notebook, or maybe the lock screen on your phone, or maybe all of them. Each time you see it, remember that you don't have to feel confident. You just need to remember that God is always with you. Consider taking it a step further and memorize this passage this week. When we hide God's word in our hearts, he can remind us of these truths exactly when we need them the most. I will be with you. The second thing that you can do is to trade excuses for the truth. We are all great at coming up with excuses. And did you notice how fast and how quickly Moses had plenty of excuses ready? As soon as God started telling him his plan, Moses immediately jumped in with, who am I? And what if they don't believe me? And if we keep reading, there's even a point in the next chapter when Moses tries this one out. He says, I'm not very good with words. I get my words tangled and tongue-tied. It was like Moses was looking for literally any reason to talk God into picking someone else. And now before we get too judgmental of Moses, I think it's safe to say that we usually aren't any better. Maybe they aren't the same excuses that Moses used, but they are still excuses. I'm too young. I don't know enough. What if I mess up? What if they ask me questions I don't know the answers to? Well, here's the thing. God didn't accept Moses' excuses, and he won't accept yours either. Not because he's mean, but because he knows they're not true. This week, I want to challenge you to identify one excuse that has been holding you back from something God might be calling you to do, and then replace that excuse with the truth we learn from the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, which says, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness." When the excuses try to come back, go straight to God's promise. My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. Don't let fear have the final word. Let God's truth be louder. There's one more way that we can take action, and you can even do this before you leave youth group here tonight. Number 3, help someone else see what God sees. Let me let you in on a little secret. You're not the only one who doubts themselves. The person sitting next to you might be battling the same kind of insecurity as Moses, wondering if God could really use someone like them. So here's your challenge. Before you leave to head home, think of one person who might be feeling unseen or overlooked, and then tell them something specific you see in them that God can use. You could say something like, "You are really patient with people, and I think God can use that in an amazing way." Or, "I see leadership in you that you might not even realize." Keep it simple, keep it real. Sometimes one word of encouragement is all it takes to help someone see themselves the way God sees them. And remember, if Moses can go from "who am I" to leading a nation out of slavery, imagine what God might do through you. Be open, encourage each other, and let's figure out together what one step of faith looks like this week. Let's pray.